Hi everybody, and welcome to the I Rock Knits podcast. If I don't get started, it's never going to happen. It has been a crazy morning around here. I'd sit down, and the invisible fence man came, and I sat down, then the lawn people came, and then they're working across the street, and people can't get up and down the street because our garbage cans are at the end of the driveway, and all of the things have conspired against me. Should have known. It's a full moon out there. Okay, my name is Corey Eichelberger, and I live in the southwest suburb of the Twin Cities. Welcome to everyone. I'm just so thankful that I'm finally sitting down at 3:40 when I started to get ready at 11. Interruptions. Let's say hello to a few people. Sharon Seenauer, Carol Rabick, Gail S., Judy B., PJ, Rerec M., Beth Huskins, Jean Effie, Mary B., Wittatter 1, which I've been saying Wittatter, and I think you're a Wisconsin tatter. Boom! Tell me if you're a Wisconsin tatter, W-I tatter 1, but it's Wittatter, all one word. I don't know why I couldn't get that. Beverly Foth, Tiffany Sharp, Connie Simonich, Lisa Rowe, Joy, Ashley, Olivia Mankey, Chris S., Rebecca Katnia, Marcia Smith, Liera Dimitriou, WT30001, Peggy Bork, Sonia Galloway, Ann Caddy, Kelly Mathern, Pat Wagner, Denise Norber, Prudence, Yarn I Knit with Thanisha, Amy Blanford, Mary Lee Bramer, Sharon Noonan, Glenda Bathgate, Melissa Brown, Kathy Goodman, Emma Butcher, Beverly Bullock, Fernie, Lou Ann Hendricks, Robin Gasser, Cynthia M., Helen Paxford, Andy Ferris, Sharon Quinn, Michelle, Knit Takes Two, Linda Gesling, Chris Osborne, Melanie, Amy Mickelson, Emily Doyen, Lisa Gregg, Ann Caddy, Deb Vandermolen, Debbie M., and I have a story to tell today about a commonality that I have with Debbie M. A commonality that neither one of us wants to have. That'll intrigue you all. Susan Selby, Karen Mezzacapo, Little Mimi 1919, Angela Jenkins, Stephanie Haberman, Hot Tan, who is Rita, Quilter Ann, who read Mrs. Bird 2 that I talked about last week, which is excellent, and Gail Sheffley, who read Eleanor Oliphant, which I also really liked. So that was a good one, and now the dog's gonna go crazy. I'm not sure what his problem is. But if I don't barrel on, you guys, supper, I'm gonna have to start making supper for both the family and the dog. So we're just gonna keep going. Audible books that I read this week and what I'm reading. Let's go on to that. Okay, I'll pet the dog. Can you all see him? No, he's not quite tall enough. There's a nose, so you'll probably see him. So they started to clean up the street next door with a little bobcat, cleaning up all the rocks from the pool and landscaping and mulch that they've been doing, and so the guy was dragging it all up the street. So I paused, and then the dog needed to be fed. You guys, this is going to be so interrupted today. I just don't know what to do. The invisible fence man came, and then he came back because he couldn't find a break in the line, and there's a break in the line because the beeper's going off, and the dog keeps going to the neighbors next door to steal the neighbor dog's treats, and once he figured out that the invisible fence wasn't there, he's like, I'll just jolly on go over and steal Tata's treats from next door. I'm just gonna like calm my heart rate, which I already have a very high heart rate on a daily basis anyway, which is a whole nother story, but I do take medication for a high heart rate, and those of you who have been with me long enough understand that I'm a pretty high-strung individual, and so it's not surprising that I was born with a high heart rate. Okay, so gently and calmly, let's talk about the books I've been reading. I read Main Street. This is the one I listened to, which I think if you're going to listen, you might want to pay a little bit of attention to. It is narrated by Barbara Caruso, and it is 19 hours and 15 minutes. There are several recordings of Main Street, and I went out and did some research before I started to find out which one most people preferred. And there was one that people really didn't like who switched over to this one. Main Street is an interesting book. It is about a small town in the Midwest. But Upton Sinclair lived in, Upton Sinclair, different author. But Sinclair Lewis lived in Sauk Center, Minnesota, so it was often said that he was writing about Sauk Center. Now, it's a satire, so if you go in reading with under the understanding that he is going to be using some over-exaggeration for effect, you might not be as offended if you grew up in a small town. But if you just read it as a narrative or a personal story, you might be a little offended at the caricaturization that he did. This is one of those books that I started and thought, oh, I don't know, I'm not going to like this. And then by the end, I would say that I really quite enjoyed it. You know, a young girl is living in the Twin Cities. She wants to be a librarian. She plans to change the world. This is the 1920s. She doesn't have a lot of resources for women, and this doctor comes to town and woos her, and they have a relationship that builds, and then he decides to take her back to marry her in this small town. And then when she gets there, she finds it to be a bit beneath her, and she's very disappointed, and she thinks that the people there are not up to her standards in some ways. But it's very detailed. It's chapter after chapter of detail of living in a small town, which some of the people in my book club really enjoyed, and then some of the people just said too much. I was tearing my hair out with the detail. So I gave it 3 stars as and I like it. And I'm glad I read it because it's a classic, and I had read it probably when I went to college, and I'm guessing that I didn't read the whole thing because it is a long book. But yeah, so Main Street by Sinclair Lewis. I enjoyed it. Chime in if you've read it and you have fond memories of it, or you didn't enjoy reading it, or you had to read it as a high school senior and you thought it was terrible, because most high school seniors would not want to read this. Okay, then I also started reading this one, and I'm gonna give you just a brief synopsis here. The Coddling of the American Mind. How Good Intentions and Bad Ideas Are Setting Up a Generation for Failure. It's by Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianoff. It's 10 hours and 6 minutes, and I just returned it to Audible. A friend recommended this, a friend that I don't see all that often, and she sent it to me, and I don't know why she thought I might like it. I mean, I like to read a lot of different things, so that's probably why, but I'm going to read you just a little brief synopsis. The generation now coming of age has been taught 3 great untruths. Their feelings are always right, they should avoid pain and discomfort, and they should look for fault in others and not themselves. These 3 great untruths are part of a larger philosophy that sees young people as fragile creatures who must be protected and supervised by adults. But despite the good intentions of the adults who impart them, the great untruths are harming kids by teaching them the opposite of ancient wisdom and the opposite of modern psychological findings on grit, growth, and anti-fragility. So I thought it was going to be forward-thinking and really get to the heart of some matters. I don't know. I got a quarter or a third in, and because of the conversations that we've been having on Instagram and Ravelry and in general on race, and I have done some of my own work in that area. As I'm reading, am I listening, and I was walking at the dog park this morning, and I was thinking, I want to know how a person of color would feel about this, because I'm off-put, and I think they would be more off-put. And so I went to Goodreads, and I looked through a ton of reviews for this particular book, and there were very few people of color, by looking at their little pictures, who were chiming in about the book. And I thought, yeah, there's something not collaborative about this work. It's not inclusive. It spoke of like microaggressions in a way that I thought was not accurate. And these men are, you know, both learned, scholarly, college people doing research. And then once I went to Audible and returned it, I thought they're kind of, the exact point they're making about not wanting to read about people's points of views that you disagree with is exactly what happened to me. I just disagreed. I didn't read the whole thing. I didn't get far enough in. So the only reason that I bring it up is because I would really like to know if someone read it and finished it, and if any people of color in my feed found it as even more off-putting than I did as a white privileged woman. And because I felt like they were really speaking about young white kids on white campuses, and I don't think that that's all inclusive. And I don't know. Coddling of the American mind. Some of it I agreed, you know, I was like, okay, I get that. And then there were just some things that I just wanted to put 8 more hours into it. I just thought, not worth it. And then Ross and I started this one on our vacation, and I decided to finish that one. And I'm not quite done with it yet, but I'll show you because I already printed it out. It's called Just Mercy, A Story of Justice and Redemption by Bryan Stevenson. It's going to be a major motion picture, and I always like reading the book before I see the movie. And Bryan Stevenson was a young lawyer when he founded the Equal Justice Initiative, a legal practice dedicated to defending those most desperate and in need, the poor, the wrongly condemned, and women and children trapped in the farthest reaches of our criminal justice system. And so far, it's fascinating, but devastatingly sad how many people go to jail or are on death row and were wrongly accused and did not have due process, did not have adequate representation, and because of that, they were charged on wrong information, disinformation. Yeah, so good for us to read some of that, I think, and look at some of that. So heavy topics. I don't know. I'll try to go lighthearted with my next read, I think, because sometimes you read a few things that are just kind of in your head in a row, and then you need to branch out a little bit. Okay, we had a giveaway this week. I closed the thread this morning, and this is Matt's bag. Matt has a Etsy shop called Multi Crafty Guy Makes, and he does upcycled bags. He buys shirts, and these are actually real shirts that he just sews shut, and then he has live working pockets here. Wonderful. He was on the podcast if you're new, but anyway. My little boys just got off the bus. Yesterday I went out because Cody was barking, and they were barking at him. Don't mess with my dog. I mean, he's a good boy, but I want to say, how stupid are you that you're going to bark at a dog who's laying in the garage? He's got an invisible fence when it's working, but you're going to bark at a dog who might come charging down the driveway after you. I mean, I have a big dog. He's super friendly, and he would not do that, but don't be a fool. I did not go trudging out there to tell them off, but I probably should. The winner of the bag is number 70, Dark and Lovely. And that is Elma from New York. So congratulations, Elma. I will put this in the mail to you as soon as you send me your address. So you can just PM me on Ravelry or send me an email to Corey@iRockKnits.com and I will put it in the mail. I'll put it in a mailer and have it all ready on my kitchen counter. So congratulations and thank you. So many of you shared your favorite fall memories. And a few of you don't like fall, and that's perfectly fine. You prefer summer, but so many of you shared your memories, and that was just wonderful. I'm just going to make a brief comment about something that I do that kind of bugs me, is that I'm one of these people all the time because I have bifocals, and so when I do this, just look away. It drives me crazy. I try to edit it out because I'm reading something or I'm trying to see the camera or what it's saying, and then I tip my head back. It's kind of irritating. So, you know, I just want you to all know I know I'm doing it. Whatever. Okay. I will be teaching this weekend in Michigan at the mountain retreat in northern Michigan, Boyne Mountain. I'm doing sweaters on Sunday, and Saturday night I'm doing my Skeins to Skeins game, so I think there are still a couple of spots available. If you're interested, contact Piece of You Yarn Shop in Bay City, Michigan. Then when I get back, I am starting teaching at the library this week, so I'm teaching beginning and beyond beginning knitting at the libraries. Chanhassen Library if you're local. And then I have a shawl workshop coming up at 3 Kittens Yarn Shop. She's going to have me back to do shawls, and it's on October 3rd from 6 to 9. So if you are in the area and are looking to take my 50 Shades of Shawls class, I will be teaching it at 3 Kittens. Then I have 2 events in Wisconsin in October. One in Racine and one in Eau Claire. It's all on my website, but I just thought I would share that. Also, Leading Men Fiber Arts has my Fiber Friends shawl kitted up. So if you are interested in knitting the Fiber Friends shawl, which takes 2 skeins of DK, unless you want to make it bigger, and it is a pattern that when you get halfway through, it tells you that this is the halfway point so that you can shorten it or lengthen it right in there to make sure that you have enough yarn. But the Leading Men Fiber Arts guys put it together as a kit, and it's on their website, so I thought I should share that as well. Today I'm going to share a sweater and a shawl as per usual, and then on our next podcast I might have a little surprise. And then the podcast after that might be Matt coming back to share his Rhinebeck sweaters. My Rhinebeck sweater is almost done. I decided to lengthen it just a little bit, so I blocked it and tried it on before I put the bottom ribbing on, and decided that yes, it could be a little longer, so I'm adding that right now, and it is a all over color work, 8 colors, quite bright and colorful as you would expect from me, but I'm really excited about it. So that's been really fun. I told you last time that I was having a little back procedure done. So last Tuesday I had a steroid injection in my back. I'm sorry I wasn't more clear. Some of you thought I was having surgery. I did not have a surgery. I am been being treated at the TRIA Pain Clinic for about 5 years with back issues. I think I've told you guys, but I was a collegiate gymnast 40 years ago, before spring floors and before nice spring boards. Ours were wood. We didn't even have metal springs until I was in college. We didn't have, you know, good equipment, and so I pounded from the time I was 8 years old until I was 21. And so I have lots of back, neck, arm, shoulder, knee, ankle issues from that, and the orthopedic program at TRIA has been amazing for me. So I had been having RFA ablations, which are radio frequency ablations, where they go in under x-ray and burn the nerves in your back, and that worked for me for 5 years. He's kept me from having surgery, but I did have a couple of you reach out to me and say, what are you doing for your back? And so I know that some of you also suffer with low back pain. So I had the RFA ablations done, and that's kind of a insurance kerfuffle where you have to have a practice ablation and see if you get relief, and then have another one before you can have the real thing done. you have to jump through those hoops. But this time, he said, I think we're gonna try a steroid injection, and we did. And I was dancing at the wedding on Saturday night. I have maybe had a couple of twinges where I was like, oh, is it coming back? But it hasn't. I mean, zero pain. I went from sitting for the entire month of August. I did not walk at the dog park. I was not lifting anything. I was sitting. I was really in a bad place, probably the worst it's been, to literally no pain. And there's some controversy around steroid injections. I understand that. It's a choice that I made, and I went and walked at the dog park this morning and did 3 laps. And so I can, you know, I can say that that's what works for me in this state right now. But I did want to tell everyone that my parents came for the wedding. It was my nephew's wedding. It was here in the Twin Cities. And after the dance, we were all kind of leaving, and we were walking out of the event center. It was in an old mansion in downtown Minneapolis, and my mom fell. And she tumbled down the stairs and really banged herself up. She gouged a giant tear in her arm, probably this long, right down to the bone. She hit the back of her head, so she had a wound. She hit the top of her head. She hit her nose from her glasses. She was a little disoriented right at first. I think she went down so fast that she didn't know what had happened. But there was a paramedic there, the man of honor, my new niece. Her best friend is her cousin, and he happens to be a guy, so he was her man of honor, and he's a paramedic. And he was right there, and we got her in a wheelchair, and we loaded her in my car. She thought we could just go put a couple Band-Aids on, but we had to go to the ER. And we took her to the hospital where she had her back surgery here last November. So she's already in the system, which is great. And she got 16 stitches in her arm and 3 staples in her head and a CAT scan and an x-ray. And we were there until about 3 in the morning on Saturday night. It was really a bummer, a long night. And so then we went to their hotel and packed up their stuff while she was having the MRI done, and brought and put it in our car because they had planned to stay at the hotel with everyone else and then get up in the morning and have breakfast with people. But we didn't. We wanted them to come to our house, so we brought them home. And then they stayed here yesterday all day. We iced her shoulder because she fell on her new shoulder replacement. I mean, it could not have gone any worse, other than that she did not, at this point, do any damage, we don't think, to her shoulder or back. It was cement steps, and she's a little frail since she's had her back surgery. And, you know, I think she was stepping down, and it was dark, and she was going to get into the shuttle. And it just happened so fast. So again, if you're the praying kind, which my family is, you know, she's gonna be really sore for the next few days. She was pretty okay with it. She said it could have been much worse, and, you know, it wasn't a car accident. Nobody was seriously hurt, or nobody, you know, died, and the wedding was beautiful. And, you know, really nice, and they had stayed as long as they had wanted, and people were just gathering up to leave. And we had just gone out maybe 5 minutes before her, so we were just waiting for our car to be pulled up, and so happened to be right there. Yeah. Anyway, and can I just say, the city hospital on the full moon Saturday night, whew, we saw some stuff. Wow, really, really, really busy. Ended up sitting for a long time and waiting, and after they triaged her. So gosh, you know, it's just always something. I feel like my mom has had, you know, so many surgeries, and she just can't quite catch a break. Like, she's just going to be that person. If someone's going to fall, it's going to be mom. If someone's going to you know, something's going to happen, it's going to be mom. And I just don't understand how some people have that, you know, have to have that. And I have a friend who, I think, gosh, really? This has to happen to her too? Like, hasn't she had enough? Everybody has their trials and tribulations, right? I know, but so they left this morning. Another reason that I wasn't like getting up and getting this recording done right away. This is an old old shawl design, but I really love the knitting of it, and it's a smaller shawl, and I think that sometimes those small projects are really nice to do. So this is Earth and Sky by Stephen West. Came out in 2011. So, you know, it's an older one. It's a fingering weight. It comes in 3 sizes, small, medium, and large, and I happen to make the smaller size. I used 3 colors, and it is a color block technique, which is just really fun and interesting to do. So if you, like me, like trying something new each time you knit something, trying a different technique, trying a different way of doing something, then this, I think, is a good one to give a go. There were many thousand people have knit it. The pattern is well written. 22 stitches in stockinette on a 4 needle. The measurements, finished measurements, are 15 inches, 18 inches, and 23.5 inches. So it never gets gigantic, but you could, as you can see, you're doing more repeats on those lower ones. And it does call for 3 colors, but you can definitely get away with using some of your scraps, I believe. So it tells you in color A, in the small size, you get 150 yards, and then in color B, 65 yards, and then color C, 180 yards, and then it goes up from there in the 3 colors. So if you've got some scraps hanging around, I really loved this. I purchased this yarn at Stephen B. It's part of his Peacock collection from back in the day. I didn't knit it right away when it came out, but it really is a fun design where you are going back and forth, and then you're knitting the garter sections here are solid, so you get a little like rest row, and then here you're just swapping out as you come to them. Some of you really like it when I laugh about life, but I got a ping on my telephone, and the library that I sent all the copies to be copied had no attachments. So I copied all of the attachments in there and sent them to the lady who needs to make the copies, and none of the attachments got there. So I just had to go do it again. And I had to remember, like, beginning knitting, you need how to knit, how to purl, how to cast on. You need all the handouts. And oh, I don't know why they weren't there. I did it this morning. So I got interrupted. Then I had to put Cody in the mudroom. Now the guys are laying sod, so I'm hoping we'll be quiet for a moment. We're gonna do the other half of the shawl. So I turned this around to show you all that this is how I wear this small shawl. I like to do this a lot with my shawls, is just pick a button and sew the shawl exactly how I want it to lay. So this little t-shirt says Desperate Knitter. She has a little lime green, yeah, sparklies. She's pulling her hair out. And it's so apropos for today. Anyway, so I just picked one of those stone blue buttons, and I stitched right here with the contrast, with the same colored yarn, over here and over here, so that it would lay nicely exactly how I want it. And then I stitched the button on top. And then that's completely removable. So if I decide that I don't want to wear it that way, I don't have to. And if I, you know, don't want to wear it this way, here's another way that I sometimes would wear this, is that I would wrap this around the neck and bring this to the front, right? So it's hooked, and so now you can still wear this one bandana style without the tails, because the tails are wrapped around the neck here. So you just put it up over your head, tuck it in, and then none of that shows. So then you have the option of still wearing it bandana style, but it's attached here so that you're not going to have those ends. You know, sometimes people really hate the ends of the wearing it bandana style because they don't know what to do. So for this particular one, it would just go around your neck an extra time. Oh yeah, I could have the button right there, but yeah. So there you go. Another way to wear it. Isn't that cute? Yeah. Lime green t-shirt would be really cute with this. So pick your favorite color of yarn and your favorite t-shirt that you have in your closet and make yourself a little bandana or wear it over your shoulder. Well, you could wear it lots of ways, because if you had a really cute dress and you were trying to dress it up, you could do it the over the shoulder way. Stephen B always shows them this way, where they're down across and then this just goes up over your shoulder there. So another way, like a sash almost. It's longer on the one side, and I find that one a little more dressy, so that's why I said dress, but you could wear it like that. I always try to show in shawl class multiple ways to wear a shawl, because I find lots of people knit lots of shawls and don't wear lots of shawls. So if clipping your shawl shut will help you to wear it more like a cowl and just throw it on over your head, that's great, right? Just a really easy way to just put it on, because it's like a cowl. It's been connected. And then that's clippable. You can take that out if you decide that that's not how you want to wear it anymore. Aren't those colors just fun? And I use so very little of them. I think I still have them left. Yeah, so there we go. Earth and sky. So I can tell you the sweater that I'm wearing today, which is one that I don't talk about in class anymore because the pattern's pretty unavailable. This is the Arc and Seal. Yeah, this is the Arc and Seal sweater by Katya. It was a translated book. You know, Katya has all of their patterns translated. So I have a better picture on my pattern page of what it looks like than this particular one. I'm not sure who put this project page up, but it was in Katya book 48, and it was one of those pamphlet-like paper bound on the side with just a couple of staples, you know, large books, and then there was an entire extra insert of the pattern in English. So the whole thing, I think, was written in Spanish, and then the insert was written in English, if I remember correctly. And this sweater took me forever to make. I bought the yarn because I loved the colors, of course. I mean, not everything I have to make is orange, but I really loved the colors of this, and the yarn was written, the pattern was written for the yarn to go with it. And it was an open front with just meant to have just a little one loop, and when I got done, I put 2 on it to make it a little better. And then I found these really pretty green, shiny buttons to go on there. And then I just made 2 little crochet loops to keep it shut. I almost always wear it with my a white shirt, white t-shirt, long sleeve t-shirt. I'm becoming my mother with a collared shirt. She always wears a collared shirt. So maybe it's just because I'm thinking about her today. But yeah, it's Arc and Seal, A-R-C-E-N-C-I-E-L. It means rainbow, but the original yarn was in this citrus color. And I don't think there were any of them that had rainbow colors, so I'm not sure why it was called that. But yeah, it's a all over lace, long sleeve. Let's swap out the shawl for the sweater so that we can talk about the other sweater today. Okay, I just had to tip this a little bit to get this in. This is a really long sweater, so I kind of wanted to show that. In the original, it's a little cropped, but I made it longer, and it is open in the front. I guess I should show that is a little bit open in the front like this. This is probably one of my favorite sweaters, and this is the sweater that I fell in love with Ultra Pima cotton. I just love it. So this is Feather and Fan. It is a sweater called Fairy Dust from Drops. And drops means free patterns, but drops also does not do a good job of writing patterns. So I'm going to tell you a little story about how this happened. I was at Yarn Over 4 years ago, and I saw a woman with this sweater cropped in pink with a little dress on, I think, and it was just lovely. It was light pink, and it matched the little, I think, a floral dress or pinstripe or something. The pattern, it was really cute. And so I went up to this woman, as you do, and said, "I love your sweater." And she said, "Oh, thank you very much, but you can't knit it." And I said, "Oh, okay." And she said, "It is very poorly written, or it is not well written, or it was a drops pattern, which means it doesn't always have a lot of detail." And so when I went out and printed it, it was about this big. And she said, "But I put notes on my Ravelry page, and I have about 3 pages worth of notes about how I made it work for me." And I said, "Oh, okay." And I said, "What's your Ravelry name?" And she said, "I'm Tech Knitter." And I was like, oh, I wanted to kind of crawl in a hole, because in Minnesota and nationally, she's fairly well known, and I had no idea who she was. So it's TECH, Tech Knitter. She does a lot of patterns and math, and has a blog and a website that are very, very knowledge producing. She really, really has a lot of a knowledge around knitting. And so I went home and looked at the pattern, which is this one. That's how short it is. Can you see that there? Now that I turned this, my lights are a little off. And so the pattern is free, which I think they use as an excuse to not, spend a lot of time. They're trying to sell yarn to you. And so then I went to her Ravelry page and printed out her 3 pages of notes, and that's how I knit the sweater. And basically you're on your own. Feather and fan is not uncommon. People know how to knit it. It's not a stitch pattern. It's kind of one of those stitch patterns that's in the public domain, so you're really not, it's not too hard to find the pattern. You just need the cast on numbers in order to know what you're doing. So it's worked bottom up, which in part is the problem with this sweater. I feel that not everything needs to be worked top down, but in this situation, if this would have been worked top down, it would have been much easier to do the sleeves. So it is an adult ballet neck, bottom up, buttoned buttonholes, chart, cropped elbow sleeve, front fastening, seamed, and then it has just a little bit of information down below for the sizes: small, medium, large, extra large, extra extra large, and triple extra large. So they did have a number of sizes available in the pattern, but like I said, the pattern is about a paragraph, if I remember right, of wording. So basically what it tells you to do is to cast on and then work feather and fan until it's as long as you want it to be, or they give you the inches, but in the original pattern it's short, and I wanted it to be more of a long cardie. And then when you get up to the underarm, it has you break for the underarm and knit your sleeve, and then you have to put your sleeve on the needle. So you're going to, depending on which way you're working, but you're going across here, and you have to put your sleeve on, the sleeve stitches, and then you're going across there, and then you decrease everything down to the neck, which works out okay. But right here, your feather and fan has to go up and down and up and down, and you have to turn your sleeve so that the up and the down go in the, work together. And that was the part that was really, it basically said put the sleeve in, and it didn't really tell you how to do it. So you just had to turn your sleeve circle until you got to the spot where your feather and fan was going to continue to work across here. And you either had to add or subtract some stitches in there to make that happen. Not difficult once you get your head around that. You're like, oh, okay, yeah, I just did all the knit two togethers for that. So the next part of the piece of the sleeve has to be the yarn over parts. You can't put all the knit two togethers in a row, so you just have to turn the sleeve to get it on there right, which is what she helps with. Helps you get that kind of figured out, and then how the decreases work up until the neck. So if you've knit a sweater and you know anything about feather and fan, like you've done it before, right? Which a lot of people have. It's not a difficult stitch to do. Then I don't think that this is too hard to go to her pattern page and figure it out. Because what did I read? There were 37 projects of people who have done this, and 56 people had clicked the little life buoy on, on her page that her notes helped them. So way more people than actually knit the sweater went to her 3 pages of notes and just printed them out and thought, okay, this is how I'm going to make this work. So I did make it significantly longer, and I would say that my sleeves are not quite elbow length, but they're definitely not super short either. And I have washed and worn this and washed and worn it. It is long enough that it does grow a little when I wear it, but then I can just zhuzh it back up by putting it in the washing machine. And it's a really fun little sweater to wear. I can wear it over a dress. I can wear it over a t-shirt or a long shirt. I have really worn it quite a bit. And my friend Mary in my knitting group has knit it twice too, I think, because she tried mine on, and I explained to her, go to the Tech Knitters page, get her notes, and then you'll be able to do it. And she said, yeah, you're just knitting feather and fan back and forth for many, many rows until you get to here, and then you cast your sleeve on, and then you just have to set it in there so that everything's on the needle at once, and then do the decreases. So I hope I'm not making that sound too easy or too hard. It isn't super difficult. It's just not well written in the pattern. So I called mine on my project page Orange Feather and Fan, but the actual name of the sweater is Fairy Dust, and it's 127-40 in the Drops catalog. And they recommend their Garn Studio Drops Muscat yarn, but I used the Ultra Pima Cotton DK version, which you all, if you've ever gone out to look, there are so many colors. So you could have this in purple and blue and green and cream, right? Like it could be something that you just wear in a ton of your outfits, and a pretty good price point on DK cotton. That it wouldn't be a very expensive, especially if you made it shorter, which I would like. I've been saying for 3 years that I've wanted to reknit this and have a shorter one too. I just haven't taken the time to do it. So anyway, so that is Fairy Dust, and we did Earth and Sky, and today I was wearing Arc and Seal. Okay, I'm going to finish up today with Corey's Stories. So Debbie M got in touch after the last podcast when I talked a little bit about having a bowel obstruction, and she said, oh my gosh, I have to tell you about this. And she says, that book, The Turtles All the Way Down, that you talked about, how the one character in the book is obsessed with the concept of getting C. diff, and she said, I had C. diff, and it was a terrible thing, and I know what it can be like to go through, the situation that you were going through. And I got back to Debbie and I said, you are not going to believe this, but I have had C. diff. And she's like, that's amazing in a weird way, because one, nobody wants to have Clostridium difficile, but I had it, and I have been wanting to tell this story on the podcast for about a year, mostly because I think it is educational for people to know about it. So I will just tell you a little bit about my journey with C. diff and what happened to me. About, I'm gonna say 10 years ago now, so Kylie would have been in middle school, yeah. I got really sick one night when we were out to dinner. We were eating, all of a sudden I felt really ill. I couldn't finish eating, very unlike me. And I said to my husband, I do not feel well. And he said, oh, okay, we can go home. And by Tuesday, this was maybe a Saturday night, by Tuesday I was in the hospital. And this was the week before Christmas. So I was in the hospital from Tuesday to the following Wednesday or Thursday. I was never really diagnosed with anything. They didn't know what I had. I had lots of upset stomach, nausea, diarrhea, vomiting, but just laid in a hospital bed for a long period of time. Now, knowing what we know now, that was the worst thing that that they could have done, is not had me on quarantine, but they didn't know what I had. So I had presented at the ER, and then I had come home thinking that I was better. Went back a few days later, they retested me, didn't find anything. Decided to take out my gallbladder. I had a gallbladder test, so I was thinking, okay, that's gonna fix things for me. Not that my gallbladder wasn't sick, but the gallbladder did not fix the C. diff, just so you know. So I had my gallbladder removed on Martin Luther King Day in January, that Monday. I had my gallbladder removed, so it's been, you know, several weeks. I come home from that, I'm still ill. My mental health practitioner at the time was saying something to me like, this could be all in your head, you could be making yourself ill. My mom and dad thought perhaps that I was having some real physical symptoms from a mental health aspect, so I was seeing him. He, at one point, I was so depressed and so lethargic that he recommended that I go in and have shock therapy. And I called my folks at the end of January and said, I've been laying, you know, in a curled up position for weeks now, and I don't know what's wrong with me. And he's thinking I should do shock therapy. And my mom immediately said, absolutely not. You know, we're coming, we're gonna figure this out. In the meantime, I'm trying to function as a mother and a wife, and I wasn't functioning. I would drive my daughter somewhere, and then I would crawl in the back seat with a blanket and a pillow and lay there until she would be done with soccer or swimming, and then I would crawl back in the front seat and drive home. I was very ill. So in March, finally, my husband says, you know, we've been doctoring, no one can figure out what you have, we're gonna go to the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. And when we called the Mayo Clinic, they said, absolutely, you can come down. And what happens at the Mayo Clinic is that they start over with every test that you've ever had. And although I had had a C. diff test when I had first presented at the hospital, it is very common for a C. diff test to come up as negative when you actually have it, because baby bacteria in your bowel don't show up until they're adult bacteria. So although I had C. diff and had that in my system, it didn't show up, and they never did the test again because it had been ruled out. And so when I got to the Mayo Clinic, my parents came, my husband was there, and it was maybe a couple of hours into, I was seeing a psychiatric person, I was seeing, you know, gastroenterologist, I was seeing all the people, and within a couple of hours they called and said, this doctor wants to see you, your test results are back. And we went in, and he said, you have Clostridium difficile. And I had not eaten much for, you know, now at this point it's been over 2 months, well into 3 months, and I just broke down in tears and said, it's not in my head, right? It's not in my head. And I really do think that when you have a mental health diagnosis on your chart, it is easier for them to make an assumption about your care, because they always have in the back of their mind that this could be mentally health related. And it can be, right? Absolutely, I know people who've been physically ill from a mental illness. However, that was not the case with what I was going through. I didn't necessarily think I was depressed. I was depressed because I was sick. But anyway, so the treatment for C. diff is large dose antibiotic, very expensive, a certain type of antibiotic. I get a prescription, I go home, I pick up the antibiotic. I mean, our insurance covered, but it was like, you know, $1,200 of antibiotic. You're supposed to, you know, take it and you're going to be well. and within a couple of weeks, I was sick again. So I call the doctor, they do another test, they see if it's still there, and what turns out to be happening is that I have antibiotic-resistant C. diff, so it's one of the superbugs. But how I got the C. diff, and C. diff is everywhere, it's in all your bathrooms, it's on your unclean surfaces, it is transferred via stool in. So, you know, when you flush your toilet or you touch things or you wash the handle and then you touch things, it's there. But if you have good bacteria in your colon, it can't get into it. But if you don't have any bacteria, which is what had happened to me, I had pneumonia at Thanksgiving and was put on an antibiotic. And the antibiotic that I was on cleaned out my colon. So I had no bacteria left. So how the doctor explained it to me was that I had a road that had parking spots all the way along it, all the little villi or whatever, and all my parking spots were empty. So when the C. diff came down, it could pull in to every one of the parking spots, whereas if you're a healthy, normal human individual, most of your parking spots are full with good bacteria. That's why we want good gut health. And so I had, at Thanksgiving time, had pneumonia. 2.5 weeks later or so, had full-on C. diff. 2 months later, diagnosed with C. diff. Then I begin the process of, we can't kill it. It is not working. So I do another round of antibiotic and am still very ill. Now we're getting into, you know, April, May, June. I'm wasting away. I'm losing so much weight. I can't eat. I don't sleep well. I'm up in the night often. But at least we know what I have at this point. So I contact a gentleman, a doctor in Duluth, Minnesota, who is doing stool transplants. So he is a gastroenterologist who is doing a study, a clinical trial for stool transplant, which they do around the world. And at this time, 10 years ago, they were doing around the world because C. diff was so prevalent. But in the United States, we weren't doing it as much. It wasn't as common. There were only a couple places you could get it done. And this particular doctor would only put you on his trial if you had 3 rounds of antibiotic that had failed. So I had to get the C. diff back after the second time doing an antibiotic and take a 3rd antibiotic and have it come back again. So I had to wait. In June and July, I sat around waiting for the C. diff to come back, to get sick enough to show up again so that I qualified for his clinical trial. And then in August, so I got sick in December, and in August, we went to Duluth, Minnesota, and I actually had a stool transplant. And I was his 91st patient, and 90 patients had been cured. So I will tell you a little bit about how that went. We drove up to Duluth. You need to have a transplant from someone who has similar access to the same bacteria that you have. So you need to have a family member or relative so that you're not putting a lot of new introduction of things in your body. So my husband was my match, whatever. So all he had to do is go in and go to the bathroom. That's all they required of him. When he went in that morning, he just had to go to the bathroom. And then they take that and they make it into a liquid, and they put a tube, a GI tube, down my nose, way down into the upper part of my bowel, the bottom part of my stomach. They take an x-ray to make sure it's in the right spot, the GI tube, and then they just take a big syringe and they put it in there, and then you go home. So I had been through a surgery, hospitalizations, being ill, and this was nothing compared to what I had been through. Like within 2 days, 48 hours, I knew that I was going to be better. And within 3 to 4 days, we were planning to leave to go on a vacation as a family. and we went out west to a dude ranch and took my daughter, who had thought for 9 months that her mama was going to die, and still honestly has some trepidation about that time when she talks about it. She talks about the trauma of thinking, of watching her mother waste away. I lost about 55 pounds, and I was eating like Ensure and drinking things that were highly caloric to try to keep my strength and stamina up. But since that time, whenever I talk about my C. diff journey and what happened to me, I find that there are people, number one, that haven't heard of it, or number two, who know someone who needs to have a stool transplant because they've been sick for a long time, or know someone who has died from it. It is much more common in the elderly and in the nursing home situation, and also in hospitals. It runs rampant. For a long time after I had it, if a hospital got it in their building, they had a really hard time getting rid of it. They couldn't clean enough of the stuff well enough to kill it, because it was becoming resistant also to like cleaning chemicals and things like that. I'm no doctor, but eventually a doctor here in the Twin Cities developed a cleaning solution that would kill C. diff. So I'm a proud survivor of a stool transplant. It was actually, the procedure was nothing in comparison to how amazing I was and how quick I was to get better shortly thereafter. So I like to tell the story, or at least to talk to people about it, because if you're a person that's suffering or knows someone who's suffering with bouts of diarrhea, nausea, vomiting, stomach cramps, feeling ultra miserable without a cause, and you've been tested for C. diff and it came back negative, you need to be retested. If you know someone who's taken an antibiotic treatment once or twice and it hasn't helped them, then the stool transplant is the way to go. They can do them through a colonoscopy. I have heard of a doctor here in the Twin Cities that does them through a colonoscopy, where he puts the stool from the other end. I don't know that that has had as good as of a result. Like I don't know if it's been as successful as the way that I had it done. But anyway, a whole lot of talk about stool, and not something you probably want to hear about. But if you now know, I think if people know about it, it can be beneficial. You can help someone. My hairdresser had a lady who hadn't come to get her hair cut for a long time, an older woman, and he had found out that she had C. diff, and he called me and said, would you talk to her? And I did, and she had antibiotic resistant C. diff and was just wasting away at home. And so I told her where I got my transplant, and I had someone call me from another part of the country who somebody had told that my aunt knew someone, and then we told them and they got help. So, it's just one of those things that if you don't know how to get help, I think it's becoming more common, right? Like that more people know about it. But at the time, 10, 11, 12 years ago, it wasn't as, it was rampant and it wasn't as common. So that is my Corey Stories for the day. It's your little health check. One of the things that my doctor had said to me at the time is people will tell you to go home and to eat yogurt so that you can get bacteria, good probiotic in your colon. And he said that is probably not anything that you can do to help with, because when you put yogurt in your stomach acid breaks it all down. So it has a really hard time actually getting to the colon and building up the colon. So I could have eaten yogurt for months and it wouldn't have ever given me probably the good bacteria that I needed in my colon. You can get probiotic capsules that are, what are they, the slow release, where they have a thick outer coating so they stay in your system longer. But probiotics, that whole Activia thing, I love Activia, vanilla Activia, probably not doing you a whole lot of good in your bowel. because it's not getting there. So I'm not an expert on this. I don't have all the answers for everybody. I can't even speak to whether or not I know everything. I just can tell you what my experience with it was. So thanks for listening. I'm just going to briefly say thank you, Suzanne. You know what you did. Made my day. I'm just going to briefly put this in here. Most of you will not see this before tomorrow night, but if you are a Minnesota knitter and you have never been to the Minnesota Knitters Guild, you need to go, and you need to go tomorrow night. Tuesday night, 7 to 9, the State Fair meeting at the Minnesota Textile Center, right off of 280 and University. It's the best meeting of the year. So much fun to see everybody bring their State Fair entries and talk about what the judges had to say, who won which ribbons, and take a close personal look at all of the beautifully knit items that were in the State Fair this year. Anybody is welcome to join at the meeting. You do not have to be a member. You can just come in and participate and watch. I love this meeting every year. I wouldn't miss it for the world. I have not entered something in the State Fair in a long time. I should, but I don't. It comes around every year in August, the entry time, and I think, oh, I didn't get anything ready for that this year. But those people who do knit some absolutely stunning, beautiful things. And so the Knitters Guild has their meeting for everybody to showcase their wonderful stuff. So tomorrow night at 7 p.m. I am going to get ready to start supper. Usually I'm getting ready to go to lunch when I finish up my podcasting, but we're gonna have a little chicken stir fry tonight, and so I will edit this after supper and then upload it after that. So it might be up a little later tonight, but I still plan to get it up tonight. I want to thank everybody who contacts me and tells me what you have going on in your life and what you're reading and what you're knitting every week. It's my way to interact with all of you in the comments or on Ravelry, in the Ravelry group. So I really appreciate your watching each and every week now that we're into year 2 of this podcast journey, and my little bit of wanting to help teach people a little bit about sweaters and shawls, and encourage all of you that if you haven't knit a sweater, let's be thinking about casting one on this fall or winter so that you too can have the joy that I experience from knitting sweaters. In the meantime, keep it colorful and waddle on.